Everyone talks about how amazing lucid dreaming is, but nobody tells you this when you're starting out. Hi dreamers, so you're interested in learning how to lucid dream, but you're not sure what to believe or what to expect. That's perfectly normal. It's true with absolutely any subject that you start, but you might have noticed something. That everyone just rabbits on about how great lucid dreaming is, but it seems almost too good to be true. Well, is it? Well, actually, maybe it is a little bit. But I'm here to give you some honest advice about the reality of learning how to lucid dream. And if you're wondering why you should listen to this guy here, well, I'm the author of one of the world's best-selling books on lucid dreaming, but I'm also a lucid dreaming teacher and researcher. So over the decades, I've met many thousands of lucid dreamers, seen the reality of what it's like to learn how to lucid dream, and I want to make sure that you have the best advice out there. So by the end of this video, you're going to learn what it's really like to learn how to lucid dream, and hopefully that will stop you falling into some of the common traps and potentially giving up early, because I want you to lucid dream. And a good place to start would probably be the excitement. Let's face it, the idea of learning how to lucid dream is really exciting, and virtually everyone who's new to this subject is incredibly hyped up, really ready and raring to go. And why not? Because if you believe everything you're told, lucid dreaming is basically like having a wish fulfillment machine. It's something that grants every wish you've ever had in an amazing, wonderful alternate dimension where everything is possible. Why wouldn't you be stoked? Well, that's normal. Of course it's exciting, but maybe we need to get our expectations in check. So being excited is normal and expected and useful, but it's also a potential stumbling block. Because if you think about any subject you've ever learned, you start out really enthusiastic, but that eventually just turns into normality, and then you've got to continue the day-to-day practice of whatever it is you're doing, and you either keep doing that or give up. But if you're expecting lucid dreaming to always stay incredibly exciting, or at least the practice to be exciting, then that's going to stop you progressing. Be excited by the potential, but pace yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. You're not going to get instant or quick results, and if you expect that, you're only going to end up being frustrated and give up. So I'm definitely not saying don't be excited, because of course you're excited by this. Just don't expect that feeling to hang around forever, and certainly don't make that feeling the reason you're doing what you're doing, because that's going to run out, you're going to burn out, and then you'll give up. Instead, look for deeper, long-term reasons why lucid dreaming is going to be useful for you, because when you do that, then you can be in this for the long haul. So there's another strange side effect when it comes to the excitement of beginners, and it's not what you would expect. Basically, almost everything you learn about lucid dreaming comes from beginners. So most of the YouTube channels about lucid dreaming are beginners who are so excited they become evangelical and have to spread the word. The forum posts, the Reddit posts, etc., mostly those are beginners and they're excitedly spreading the word. But the problem is, do you want to learn from excited beginners? Because that's probably not really the most reliable source, and people, when they're very hyped up, tend to exaggerate. They tend to say things that simply aren't true just because they're so much in the zone of really wanting to do this. And the truth is, lucid dreaming is actually more exciting than the hype would have you believe. This is something that can sustain you for an entire lifetime, because you're exploring the depths of the human mind, and there really are no mysteries as wonderful and fascinating as that. Think of it like climbing a mountain. If you get super hyped up and try to sprint up the mountain, you're not going to make it very far. But if you pace yourself, you're sensible, and you realize that this is a long journey, you will get there and you will get the rewards. Being overwhelmed. Very few people talk about just how overwhelming learning to lucid dream can be. You realize it has a name, and then shortly after, you realize there's hundreds of other terms, weird acronyms that you need to learn. Wild, dialed, wake back to bed, etc., etc., etc. It kind of feels like you're walking into an algebra class, and that can be really overwhelming. And then there's all the techniques as well, with all equally silly names. Which one's the best one? Which ones are unreliable? Where do you start? This is really overwhelming, and you can kind of be frozen, paralyzed with not knowing what to do. But frankly, it doesn't have to be that way. Lucid dreaming isn't as complicated as many people would have you believe, and all of that silly terminology can be discarded. You don't really need to know it. Actually, the practice of lucid dreaming simply requires dedication and focus and understanding some core principles. And you remember earlier we spoke about how most of the information you learn about lucid dreaming comes from beginners? Well, another thing that beginners do to try to make themselves not seem like beginners is to make up terminology or to use terminology. It's kind of trying to blind you with science. But the reality is, if you really know this subject well, you would never need to use a single piece of terminology, maybe a few things like sleep cycle or REM, but that's about as far as it goes. The rest can all be described in perfectly plain English. So I've been using the word beginner quite a lot so far. What do I actually mean by that? Well, think of it this way. If you wanted to learn how to skydive, how many jumps or how many years would someone have to have behind them before you stopped considering them a beginner? It's roughly the same kind of principle with lucid dreaming. So I would say someone who has been practicing lucid dreaming for less than, let's say, maybe 2 years. 2 years would be a genuine beginner, and under 5 years would be sort of intermediate beginner. This is a long journey, and to really understand this, you need to put in a lot of time and a lot of work. That shouldn't put you off in the same way that it shouldn't put you off learning to skydive, scuba dive, learn karate, or anything like that. But pretty much anyone who's been doing any of those things for less than 5 years is still really in the beginner phase. Your first lucid dreams. So what should you expect from your first lucid dreams? For the first couple of years of lucid dreaming, what will you get? Will it be these cinematic, super long adventures in the mind? No, it won't be. You might have a handful of those, but the vast majority of your lucid dreams as a beginner are going to be short little snippets of awareness, and they're going to be a very mixed bag. So this is how you counter frustration. You get your expectations to match reality. Now, most of the information out there makes you believe that your first lucid dreams are going to be these super long, highly controllable adventures in Wonderland. But that's not true. The vast majority of your lucid dreams are going to be tiny little snippets, maybe 1 minute, maybe 5 minutes maximum, of vague awareness and vague control, and then a frustrating awakening just before you do the thing you want to do. But that's the same with anything. If you were learning karate, you're not going to be able to jump in a ring and be like some kind of martial arts expert in your very first year of training. Of course not. That would be bonkers. You're going to get punched in the face more than you're going to block those punches. That's the reality of learning. But every time you have these little glimpses of lucidity, you are learning a lesson. You're learning something that's going to push you closer and closer to your long-term goal, which is longer, regular lucid dreams. And trust me, I get it. You don't want to hear this. This is the opposite of what everyone else has been telling you, and it's disappointing, and it's kind of putting you off a bit, and you're ready to click away from this video. Don't do that. What I'm trying to do is to get you to where you want to be. I'm trying to give you the stamina to succeed. Having the wrong expectations will lead to frustration and giving up, and you'll just become another failed lucid dreamer, filled with frustration. I want you to be a lucid dreamer, but being a lucid dreamer is going to take time. And frankly, why would it be any other way? What you're trying to do here is amazing. It's absolutely mind-boggling. You're trying to become a master of your mind. And someone who wants to be a master of their body, someone who is a martial arts expert, that takes a lifetime of practice too. It takes a lot of work. Why wouldn't your mind be the same? And also, every moment of awareness is you being better than the vast majority of people out there. Most people don't have what it takes to have even that, but you're achieving that, and for the first year, every win is worth having. Every few minutes of lucidity is amazing. You're being amazing when you do that. You're doing something truly astounding, and it's only going to improve with time. But because the mind is much weirder than the body and much more unpredictable, you will still have some amazingly profound long lucid dreams as a beginner, and they're kind of the carrot at the end of the stick that's going to keep you inspired to keep practicing. But don't expect those as the default lucid dreams, because those are only going to become your default after maybe 5+ years of practicing. And here's the hard truth. I could have millions of subscribers if I didn't say this, because most people want to hear the hype. That's what they want. And if I was happy to lie, if I was happy to make things up, I could make a lot more money doing that. But what I actually want to do, because I'm a legitimate teacher trying to share this subject with you, is I'm going to be honest and I'm going to take the hit in subscribers in order that those of you who really want to do this can actually learn. What nobody talks about. So there are quite a few things that nobody ever mentions when it comes to lucid dreaming, but this is one of the main ones. It's actually going to be not really much about your dreams at all, because one of the main benefits of lucid dreaming is that you engage something called metacognition, thinking about how you think. And when you start doing that regularly, whether it's through dream journaling, day journaling, reality checks, or various different lucid dreaming techniques, you're going to start to understand that actually most of your life has been spent in some form of dream, or at least some form of delusion. We spend most of our lives looking outwards and not inwards, and even when we do look inwards, we tend to do so with quite a generous rose-coloured spectacle kind of way. We think of ourselves quite highly. But lucid dreaming requires you to stop doing that, because you need to start analysing who you really are and how you really are in various different circumstances. And most of us bumble through lives, sleepwalking our way through our lives, not really questioning how we think. To be a lucid dreamer and to be a lucid individual, you're going to need to start really understanding what you really are. And that's kind of shocking. Real lucid dream training is very little to do with techniques or terminology. And when it is, that's really just a way to shoehorn you into a certain way of being. What lucid dream training is really about is about who you are, how you think, how you behave. Those are the core principles. This is about self-discovery and about self-transformation, but not in some hippy-dippy, polished way. This is about learning about your flaws, learning about where your weaknesses are, and that's really quite difficult to do. Many of us don't have the stamina or gumption to do that honestly. But if you want to have long-term, long, regular lucid dreams and a lucid life, that is absolutely vital. It's the only true path there. In fact, there's one question which, if you genuinely asked it honestly and you did this regularly, would lead to lucid dreams without any techniques or any other practices, although those would come naturally by asking the question. What's the question? It's this: how am I deceiving myself? If you meditate on that, if you ask that question regularly, and with absolute brutal honesty, you will become a lucid dreamer, but you'll also become a far more lucid individual. And it might seem like that's a really simple question, a very simple statement, but what it really is the doorway to a very deep rabbit hole. Here's an example. Even embedded in that question is one of the biggest, most complex questions of reality. What is self? When you ask, how am I deceiving myself, you also have to define what self is. And that's just one example of how asking that question can lead to a much, much deeper understanding of all this. The biggest secret. So what's the biggest secret that nobody ever mentions when it comes to lucid dreaming? Well, you may already have an inkling for what that is. It's that lucid dreaming isn't about lucid dreams at all. And it's certainly not how I teach lucid dreaming. When you start to pull on the thread, trying to get yourself to the world of lucid dreams, you realize that what you're actually doing is engaging in real-world living philosophy. It is you asking the deepest questions about reality. It is you pulling yourself apart and rebuilding yourself anew. Lucid dreaming, in my opinion, is one of the purest forms of investigating the nature of this. In many ways, lucid dreaming is very similar to those old tales about genies and magic lamps. On the surface, they both seem simple. They are ways to get your wishes granted. That's how it seems, right? But what is the genie story really telling us? Well, it's actually a bit deeper than it seems, because in order to have your wish granted, there's another question hidden inside of that. And that question is, what is happiness to you? Now, that again seems relatively simple, but often in these tales, when people have their wish granted, they end up cursed. They've accidentally cursed themselves because they didn't truly know what would bring them happiness. But in order to understand what would bring you happiness, you also need to understand who you are, what your motivations are, what makes you tick. Lucid dreaming is very similar to this. At the start, lucid dreaming feels like a journey towards getting your wishes granted, but in reality where you're truly heading is towards understanding who you are. And if you'd like to continue that journey, try watching one of the videos on the screen right now. I'll see you there.